Cape Breton is one of Canada's most historic places. Though many races have made it their home, the Scot, living in its forested glens, has made it Nova Scotia's Scottish island. This island, which today quickens the imagination and stirs romantic dreams, was not always so Celtic. It was claimed for England by John Cabot in 1497. Though attempts at settlement followed, the island remained lonely and relatively unimportant in history until it was ceded to France in 1713. A few years later, an empty harbor facing the Atlantic became the most strategic site in Canada's early history, because here, Louis XV built the mighty Fortress Louisbourg to control the gateway to New France. Here was shaped the destiny of a nation. Cape Breton was ceded to France twice. Twice Louisbourg fell, first to New England provincials, and finally in 1758 to the English, who later reduced it to a mass of rubble. Under reconstruction, the fortress will rise from the ruins to reveal its role in Canada's early history. When the French dug coal out of the cliffs at Port Morion for their garrison at Louisbourg, they established the first coal mining operation in America and the humble beginning of the industrial development of Cape Breton. At the turn of the century, steel became the industry that made Sydney into the busy cosmopolitan city of today. In 1960, the new chemical pulp mill at Point Tupper revitalized the Strait of Canso area. So we see, in part, the industrial face of the island as it is today. But it has another face. The island is a natural parkland. Hills and valleys are carved by rivers, such as the Margaret. The salty waters of the Brador Lake, expanding into the heart of the island, are really an arm of the sea, a waterway into the interior. And round the coast, highways skirting the cliffs link coastal villages, once only accessible by sea. Some of these villages, like Cheticamp, were settled by the Acadian French, who after the fall of Louisbourg, moved into remote areas on the island. And today, as their forefathers before them, they find their living in the sea at their doorstep. The women of Cheticamp excel in handcrafts. Their artistry in rug hooking has been handed down for centuries. Each generation learning from an earlier one the special skill that has made their hand-hooked rugs famous in faraway places. Elizabeth Lafort has developed hand-hooking to a fine art. Her pictures, although worked in wool, are as delicate in texture as an oil canvas and have been hung in art galleries and even in the White House. Their deep religious faith is expressed in their beautiful churches. Down through the years, the Acadian French have retained their language and many of their customs, which even today lend the atmosphere of old France to these scattered villages by the sea. Early in the 19th century, Scottish immigration began. Thousands of Highlanders came and settled in the glens and valleys of the island. They too held to their traditions. Today, the loom, still a common sight in many a household, is used in leisure time for creative handcrafts. Time was when the loom was an essential part of living, used by the womenfolk to weave blankets and clothing for the whole family. The milling of the coarse homespun cloth, as in the old days, is repeated even today on occasion when friends gather for an old-time milling frolic to the lilt of Gaelic songs. Iona, on the Strait of Barra in the Brador Lake, is the setting for competitions in square dancing and Scottish country dancing, so dear to the heart of the Scot everywhere. The Gaelic Maud at St. Anne's is a gathering of the clans. An annual competition in piping and traditional Scottish dances. Many of these dances have historic origins. Flora MacDonald's Fancy, for instance, was in honor of Flora MacDonald for the help she gave Bonnie Prince Charlie years ago in Scotland. The Celtic culture is perpetuated at the Gaelic College, site of the home of the Reverend Norman MacLeod, who founded St. Anne's. For 31 years, as preacher, magistrate, and teacher, he molded the lives of his Scottish followers. His leadership and zeal, an epic of the community. Later on, another Scot, Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, brought fame to the island. Today, a museum displays his achievements. Its architecture stresses the tetrahedral shape Dr. Bell used in designing his man-carrying kites. The museum itself is an archive of his finished and unfinished works. Before Bell made his home near Bedeck, he had already invented the telephone. But it was on Ben Brea that he experimented with tetrahedral kites, the forerunners of the Silver Dart that flew over the frozen waters of Bedeck Bay in 1909. That flight made history and made the whole world aware of Bedeck, the quiet little town on the Brador Lake where Bell saw his dream come true. The tranquility of the lake contrasts with the boldness of the Cabot Trail, which leads to adventure and exploration, as its name suggests. Rising 1,500 feet to look down on the Gulf of St. Lawrence, dropping to meet the sea, winding inland through virgin forest, cutting its way through majestic mountains, the trail unfolds one vista after another as it opens the way to the northern part of Cape Breton Island. Now the trail emerges and overlooks the broad Atlantic as it winds down the face of Smoky, 1,000 feet above the sea. Picnic grounds and campsites in the Highlands National Park seem to blend with their surroundings. Near the village of Ingonish, the entrance to the park leads also to Celtic Lodge. With warm hospitality, the lodge extends the traditional Gaelic greeting, Ciad Mil Fielte, 100,000 welcomes to a Celtic holiday. The golf course skirts the seashore and winds back through sheltering hills. Often at Celtic, It's hard to choose between the sophisticated and the natural pleasures, between the placid pool and the invigorating surf. For 1 whole mile, Ingonish Beach stretches its sandy length. Its theme is relaxation. Its music, the rhythm of the sea. Over and above the surf, seabirds range. Lonely islands offshore are their sanctuaries. Cormorants and gulls are the familiar inhabitants, but the islands of Hereford and Cebu, off Big Brador, are the nesting grounds of less common birds, too. The puffin, a diving bird that somewhat resembles a parrot, can catch 4 or 5 fish and hold them in its bill while returning to feed its young. Of the same family as the puffins, the razor-billed auk is another rare find. Hereford and Cebu are one of the few southern nesting grounds of these subarctic birds. In the autumn, Cape Breton is an adventure in color. Along the Cabot Trail, the wooded Highlands shimmer, more golden than the hills beyond the sea. But there is remembrance of the past in the lone shieling. Built of stone and roofed with thatch, it is a replica of the shelters still used by crofters of western Scotland while tending their flocks in the hills. From the lone shieling of the misty island, mountains divide us and the waste of seas. Yet still the blood is strong. The heart is Highland. And we in dreams behold the Hebrides.